channel. So today I want to talk about a struggle that I think almost all book lovers will recognize and can relate to, is buying too much books and then don't have the time or don't take the time to read them all. So I love buying books, and I will buy most of the time I will get books as a present for my birthday or for Christmas, and then I will buy some books myself. I will order them online. I can go inside a bookstore and come back with no books at all. I will always buy 1, 2, 3 or more books. So I try to avoid bookstores when I already had a lot of books as a present or bought books online. And then when I will be in a bookstore, I will buy some more books, and all of those books will end up on my bookshelf, and a lot of the time I wouldn't even look at them. So of course I read a lot, especially now when I'm trying to read more. But when I was in college and when I just graduated, started working full time, I noticed that I stopped reading all that much, and I wanted to do it, but every time I was too tired or I had other things to do, and I made all of these excuses not to read. But I still like buying books. The whole idea of having this new book, I found it very exciting. So I would buy a book and then look at it, maybe read a couple of pages, and then just put it on my bookshelf and then forget about it and buy some other books again. So this year one of my goals was to read more, especially for my language learning. In my video about 2020 goals, I said that I wanted to read 20 books in Russian, and I wanted to read some English books as well, and of course I wanted to start reading in Japanese, but that's a little bit more difficult because I am not really quickly in reading Japanese right now. When I have a book in Dutch, I can finish it, especially if it's like 200 pages. I will finish it in 1 or 2 days. I'm not a very quick reader. I like to just take my time for it, but I can finish it in 1 or 2 days. When I have a book in English, I can also finish it in 1 to 2 days. In Russian, it takes a little bit more time because, like I said, I didn't read all that much in Russian since I'm living in the Netherlands. So it's something that I have to work on. And when I'm reading in Japanese, and especially because I only read books that are or in the kana, so hiragana and katakana, and if there's kanji in that book, I have to read it with furigana. So those are kanjis with hiragana above them, so you know what the pronunciation of a kanji is. And it takes a lot of time, and I have to look up a lot of words. So right now I'm using this app to read short stories, or I'm reading online, but I didn't really start reading a Japanese book. So when I was in Japan, I bought this book. It's a manga from Junji Ito. So I really like his work because I'm very into horror and mysteries. A lot of his manga is also made into an anime. So I wanted to read this book, and yeah, I started out and I noticed that this was way too hard. So I didn't know a lot of the kanjis, and it doesn't have any furigana in it, as you can see. So here you have some kanjis. You really should know those kanjis before you start reading this book. So that didn't work out, but I'm still, hopefully at the end of the year, of next year, I could read it without any problems, because I'm still working really hard on my Japanese. Another book that I did buy was this one. It's from the Chin anime. It's a very popular kids anime. I watched it as a kid myself. Oh, there are some postcards in it as well. So why did I buy it? This book is meant for children. So all the kanji that are used here have some furigana. So you see these kanjis, and then you have hiragana above them. So you know what kind of pronunciation you need to use. So I started reading this book, and even here I noticed that I'm reading very slowly because I don't know all the words. I need to look up a lot from these books. So it's something that I'm working on. But for this video, I want to talk to you about 20 books that I want to read this year before I will buy some new books. And I have this challenge for myself that I can't buy new books before I've finished all of these 20 books. So I made a list, and I will go through it with you. So let's get started. In this list there are books that will be in English, in Russian and in Dutch. So I will start with a book that I already discussed in my language goal videos. And this is a book from Tolstoy, Lev Tolstoy. These are 2 books, like I said in my previous video, but it's one novel, and it's called War and Peace. So it's one of the famous works of Tolstoy, and Tolstoy is a Russian writer. I haven't read a single book from him. So this will be my first book that I will read from him. And I'm very excited because I think every Russian should know his work, and a lot of people that I will speak to who like literature. And when I say, well, I'm from Russia, they will say, well, did you read Anna Karenina from Tolstoy or War and Peace? And I will, no, I didn't. So it's something that I want to start with, and these books I will read in Russian. I think it will take me some time because they have a lot of pages, and it's not like very big letters, so it's small, and it's a book that you shouldn't read very quickly. I think you need to understand the meaning of the book. It's like real literature, and yeah, I'm very excited to start on this too. So this is the first one, War and Peace from Tolstoy. In Russian it will be Vojna i Mir. So the second book that I want to talk about is a very big one, and it's Haruki Murakami 1Q84. And it's a trilogy, so it's originally it's 3 books, so it's a series, but I bought it all in one book, and I will also count this as one book. So it's one story, so I think I should read it all at once. I didn't want to read the first part and then read something else, or maybe 1 year later pick up the second part, because then I think I will forget like the main points of the first part of the book. I think this book will also take me a lot of time. It is in Dutch, so of course not in the original Japanese, because I can't handle that right now. I can't read all of those kanjis, I think. So I'm very excited for this book because it's a very famous one from Haruki Murakami. I did read some other work from him, and I also read his biography. So this book was sitting around on my bookshelf for I think 2 years now. And I'm still looking at it, and I'm thinking like, oh, I need to read that one. I really want to read that one. And I never did. But I'm very excited to start in it. I don't know how much time it will take me to finish it all, but I will let you know. And because it's a book that's like one of the famous works from Murakami, I think I will make a review about this book when I finished it. So the third book that I want to talk about is Kokoro from Soseki Natsume. And this is one of the famous works of Japanese modern literature. This version of the book has some writing on it from Haruki Murakami. And he says, Soseki Natsume belongs to the best work of Japanese literature has to offer. So I need to translate it in my head because it's in Dutch. And I will read the book in the Dutch language. It's not a very big book, so I already started reading it. So far I'm on page 26. So I will let you know when I finish this book and what my thoughts are on it. But on the back of the book it also says, this is the most loved novel from the godfather from the modern Japanese literature. So a little bit of background on Soseki Natsume. His best works are Kokoro, I Am a Cat, and Bochan. I never read all of those other books, but I'm very excited about Kokoro, The Ways to the Heart. It's the undertitle, because Kokoro means heart in Japanese. So he also wrote some haikus and fairy tales, and also a lot of other novels, and they say that he affected a lot of new Japanese writers. So I think a lot of Japanese writers are influenced by Soseki Natsume. So yeah, moving on to my fourth book, which is Dead Souls from Nikolai Gogol, and it's a Russian writer as well, and I will read it in Dutch because a lot of Russian books that I have are in Dutch. Most of the time I will buy them in thrift shops or second-hand shops, so I can't really find so much Russian books in Russian in the Netherlands. If I want that, I need to go to Russia and buy there some books or order them online, and sometimes I will find them in some Russian stores, but most of my Russian books are in Dutch. I started to read this book I think last year, and I came to page 33. So I was reading in this, but I never finished it, and I want to start all over again and just finish this book. I think Gogol is a very great writer. So I never read his books myself, but when I was a child, my grandmother would read something from Gogol to me, and a lot of his novels and a lot of his work is made into movies in Russia. So he's like very famous for his mystery novels and a little bit of horror. You can compare him a little bit to like Edgar Allan Poe of Russia, but he's horror, mystery, thriller writer. So Gogol has a lot of famous works. One of them is The Evenings on a Farm Near Dikanka. And V, I watched it. I never read the novel V. Oh, it's a short story, but I watched the movie so many times when I was a child. It's about a witch and it takes place in Ukraine. So it's very fun to watch. It's a very old movie. But they did make a new version of the movie a couple of years ago, and I don't think it's better than the original movie, but I also find the new movie very interesting. And I want to read the short story We in Russian sometime, but I don't have it right now. The fifth book that I want to read is from Fyodor Dostoevsky. It's also in Dutch. This version that I have is also in Dutch, and it's Crime and Punishment. It's also a very famous work from Russia. It's a very famous writer from Russia, and this book is, I think, known by a lot of people who are interested in literature. I never read anything also from Dostoevsky, but I think it's a work you should read if you're interested in literature, especially in Russian literature. So I think it's time for me to read this book, to finally read this book before I buy some other books. So this one is on the list. So the sixth book on my list is Fluent Forever by Gabriel Weiner. I bought this book in this week. This is the last book that I'm going to buy before I finished all of these books. But this was on my wish list for a very long time, and I was thinking about buying it. So yeah, I just couldn't wait till I was like done with all of these books before I could buy this one. So this is the last book that I have bought before the start of this challenge, and I already started reading in it. So right now I'm on page 29, and I already love it. So it's one of the best investments that I made, I think, this year in books. And Gabriel Weiner is an opera singer that had to learn a lot of four languages for his opera career. And when he was doing this, he came up with a method that worked so much better to learn a language fast. And he also gives you tips about how to remain all of those knowledge that you have learned, because a lot of things that we learn we forget over the years. So I think when I finish this book I will make a review about this as well, because I do think it has a lot of great examples on how to learn a language fast and how to remember a language. And yeah, I was very excited about this book, and I think it's worth all the money that I paid for it. I did order it online in a new condition. It was a little bit more than 22, 24 euros. I don't remember it exactly, but it has some great tips. But yeah, moving on. On the 7th place of my list, I have The Picture of Dorian Gray from Oscar Wilde. It's a book that I had for a long time now. So it's a very famous story. I did watch the movie, and I was always like very curious about the book. I think it's time to finally read it. Moving on to the 8th book on my list, and it's a book from Mark Twain, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. So it's also a classic one. So it's also a used book that I have found in a second-hand shop. So it's a little bit older, but I really like the cover of this book, and yeah, it just looks... Oh, and I bought it for €1. And the nice thing about it, I think it has some pictures from the movie, and yeah, for a second-hand book, for a used book, it's still in great condition. And I wanted to read something from Mark Twain for a long time now. I never read a book from him, but I did watch the movie from The Adventures of Huckleberry and Tom Sawyer. I think I should have read the book as well someday. So it's on my list. I want to read it before I buy some new books. The list is going to be very big, I think. So the 9th book on this list is Yun Chan's book Wild Swans, the story of $3 of China. So this book is from a Chinese writer, Yun Chan, autobiographical about the life of Yun Chan herself, but also about her mother and grandmother, and so about different generations that were living in China. And I don't know much about China, so I was very interested in the view of Yun Chan about her life in China and about the lives of her mother and daughter, of her mother and grandmother. So how it was in that time for a woman in China under different regimes. So that's everything I know for now about this book, but I'm very interested because this is the first book that I'm going to read about China. And then on the 10th and 11th place, I have 2 books from Haruki Murakami. I have a lot of books from him because it's one of my favorite writers, especially one of my favorite Japanese writers. I think all of his books always look very interesting. So this is one of his newest book series, The Killing of Commendatore. So this is part 1 and part 2. I will count them as separate books because I don't have part 3 yet. And yeah, I don't know what to expect from it, but I always expect something good from Murakami because I love his book. So I'm very excited to read this as well. I noticed that all of these books are quite big. So yeah, it will take me some time, I think, to read all of it. It's going to be very hard not to buy something in between. But I have also a small book. So I think this one will take me one day to read. It's in Dutch. And it's from Franz Kafka, only 61 pages, so it's almost nothing, but it's a very famous book from Franz Kafka, Metamorphosis. I can pronounce the title, but in Dutch it's called De Gedaanteverwisseling. That's a lot easier for me to say, but I think a lot of people will be like, oh, it's even harder, but I think Metamorphosis is harder to say than De Gedaanteverwisseling. But yeah, it's the first book from Franz Kafka as well. So he wrote his books in German, and one of his other famous books is The Protest, and in English it calls The Trial. I do have that book at home, but I didn't put it on the list because I wanted to start with this one first and see if I like it, the writing style of Kafka, and if I like it I will also read The Trial, but it's not on the list. So the 13th book on my list is a book from George Wells. This is called The Island of Dr. Monroe, and I heard about this book in a TV show that I was watching, Orphan Black. So this book is about an island who is occupied by this mad scientist that makes human-like creatures, but not exactly humans, so kind of monsters, I think. And someone will be stranded on this island, and yeah, that's where the story is about. So this novel deals with a lot of philosophical and psychological themes. I thought it would be a great book to read someday, and because it's something that I wanted to read but never did, it's going on the list. And I should read it. The book on my 14th place on the list is from Oliver Sacks. This is not the first book that I have read from him. The title in Dutch is Ontwaken in Verbijstering, but in English it's called Awakenings. I have read another book from him, and in English this title is The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. I really enjoyed this book and I was interested about this one as well. So I enjoyed the writing style from Oliver Sacks, and I think it's very interesting because he's a physician himself, and he writes about all these things that he has seen in his career, but also in a very fun way. So this book is on the list, and this one I already read from him, so I know a little bit what to expect, but I would like to read some more of his work. And on the 15th place I have a Dutch writer. So this is the only Dutch writer that I have on this list so far, and it's J. Bernlef with the book Hersenschimmen, and it has been translated into English. The English title is Out of Mind, and it's about someone with dementia. I did start reading this book 3 years ago, but I never really finished it, and I didn't came very far. I think I was on page 20, so I want to read it again, and it's going onto the list as well. So on the 16th place of my list is going to be a book from my all-time favorite writer, and it's Stephen King. I've been reading books from Stephen King for years now, but he writes so many books and he already wrote so many books. I think every year he has written a book so far, and every time that I will come into the bookstore there are some new books from Stephen King that I don't know or didn't heard about, and a lot of his books I find in secondhand stores, but also a lot of his books I will buy new. And this is an older book from him, Cujo. I heard so many things about it and I was very excited to read this. I have like a whole area for Stephen King books because I have a lot of Stephen King books. And on the 70th place it's going to be Stephen King and Owen King together. So Owen King is the son of Stephen King and they wrote a book together. Yeah, it's called Sleeping Beauties, and it's a very big book. So yeah, it's going to take some time. So this book is about a virus that is like spreading around the world and everyone is falling asleep because of it. I don't really know exactly what to expect from it, but it's the first book that he wrote with his son together. So yeah, I'm very interested in that. So we're almost finished. On the 18th place I have a book from Khaled Hosseini. It's in Dutch it's called De Vliegeraar, but in English it's called The Kite Runner. So I did like the movie and I was interested about the book, so I bought the book. I never read it and now it's time to read it. And then on the 19th place, it's also a book from Leo Tolstoy, Lev Tolstoy. It's Anna Karenina. In Russian he's called Lev Tolstoy, but Lev and Leo are kind of the same. In the translations they call him Leo Tolstoy. I think Anna Karenina's story is very famous. You have like a lot of movies and even theater shows about Anna Karenina, and I thought as a Russian person I should have some knowledge about this book and I should read it. So it's on the 19th place, and it's also a kind of a big book. So I think all together it's going to be it's only 20 books, but it's going to be a long read because almost all of these books are very big. And on the 20th place is also a Russian writer, Chekov. I never read a book from Chekov myself, but a lot of his, he wrote a lot of short stories, and a lot of his short stories, as a child I heard his stories, I saw the movies that were made from his stories, and I really liked them. So I have bought this book in Dutch, and it's about 15 famous stories from Chekov. The stories that are in here are The Lady with the Dog, it's one of his famous work, but also about love, fear, and some other stories. I don't know all of them, but it's like a list of stories that are in this book, and it's all short stories. So yeah, this is the last book that I'm going to discuss. This is the list that I want to read first before I buy some new books. And a lot of the works on this list are from Russian novelists, because most of the time I didn't read any Russian literature. I was more interested in Japanese literature or in just other books from American or English writers, and I never read something from my own country. So this year is going to be the time that I read some more Russian literature. And I have started with this already because a couple of days ago I finished The Heart of a Dog from Bulgakov in English. So I want to read it again in Russian because I really like the book. But I think a lot of the meaning of the author and like the story details were a little bit lost in the translation, so I think it's more interesting to read it in Russian. And I always say reading a book in its original language is much better than reading the translation. So I hope someday I will be able to read Japanese books in Japanese. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more videos like this. Like I said, I will make a review this week or next week about Fluent Forever. So leave in the comments down below what you think about this list and about the books that I mentioned. And I would also like to know from you guys what kind of books you read from the Russian literature and if you liked it, and what kind of books you will recommend for me to read as well this year. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next week. Bye!